Welcome, everybody. My name is Joey Barnett. I am a partner at WR Immigration, and I practice primarily in EB-5. I've been doing it for 12 years, and it is my principal area of practice. We have a great presentation today about EB-5 project due diligence, and I am very, very happy to welcome my guest, Marco Isover from America EB-5 Visa. Marco, great to see you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Joey. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, before we really get started, just got to do a little legal disclaimer. This is not legal advice or financial advice. It's just for information purposes only. If you have questions or want to schedule a consultation with Marco or I, please feel free to reach out. We have the contact information at the end of the presentation. You can also check us out on YouTube or the internet or LinkedIn. We do monthly webinars with Charlie Oppenheim, who used to work for the Department of State. I do that for EB-5. I have another partner, an attorney that does it for EB-1 and 2. And that will help you understand EB-5 immigration processes and wait times. Today, we are going to be talking about EB-5 project due diligence. And this is something that is incredibly important for any EB-5 investor who is going into the regional center program. EB-5 is a job creation program. It's also a visa program. And to qualify, you need to make a minimum investment of $800,000. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. When people think about EB-5, they may have the wrong picture in their head on who's doing this. A majority of my clients are regular everyday people who are scrapping together every bit of savings that they have, even taking on additional debt in order to fund this EB-5 investment. And they are obviously concerned about getting their green card benefit, the immigration benefit, but they're also obviously rightfully concerned about making sure that the money comes back to them and that they get their EB-5 capital repaid. So there are investment financial considerations when doing EB-5. There are also immigration considerations when doing EB-5. And that's what the point of this webinar here is today. So Marco, before we get going, maybe you can just do a little bit of background about yourself. I know you're a registered broker-dealer. As an immigration attorney, I can't provide investment financial advice. And frankly, you don't want to get investment financial advice from an immigration attorney. You want to talk with someone like Marco who has that experience and the licensure to be able to do that. So Marco, why don't you give me a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, full disclosure, thank you for mentioning that. Actually, we also don't give investment advice, we give investment guidance. So what we try to do is make it dummy, sort of like KISS concept. We take something that is arguably overly complicated and break it into pieces. And the investor is able to make a decision based on the way we have opened it up. There is a PPM that does need to be read. There's the loan agreement, all sorts of documents that have to be, they have to go through. And that is our job. So we take all of that, we put them into a very understandable format in a spreadsheet, and instead of shopping from various regional center projects, we represent quite a few of them, and we will present them the projects in each project in a different column, and we about at one point in our conversation, I'm going to share with you some of the criteria that we look at, and so they can, compare project to project and make a decision. So that is the important part of our job. We try to simplify the process, aid them to make a decision themselves with our guidance.
Got it. So that makes sense, because a lot of clients, they work with immigration counsel on source of funds and getting the immigration application ready, but then they also work with folks like Marco to help make that investment decision. And that is critically important to achieve EB-5 success, because EB-5 and the immigration benefit is based on your investment into a company that creates the jobs. All right. So let's get going. I'm glad you brought up the PPM and the loan document, because the way that it works is that a regional center sponsors a project, and the regional center files an application for the project for approval with USCIS. And in that application, it contains the business plan for the project. It contains the offering documents, such as the private placement memorandum or the subscription agreement, the operating agreement, maybe the escrow agreement, all of the information and risk disclosures related to the investment. It also contains the economic analysis and other information to demonstrate compliance with EB-5 and a credible business plan that will create jobs for U.S. workers. All of that is submitted by the regional center in this form I-956F. That form must be submitted to USCIS before any EB-5 investor can file an I-526E for that project. It does not need to be approved. The 956F does not need to be approved in order for the I-526E to be filed. But having an I-956F approval is very helpful, because it shows that USCIS has reviewed those project documents and has agreed that the project will be in a position to create the jobs in the future. And this little graphic that we have on the screen that you may be looking at is actually, that comes from USCIS's website in their question and answer. And really what the point I want to bring from this is that USCIS will only adjudicate an investor's I-526E after it has approved the regional center's I-956F. So if you're looking and thinking about timing, hey, I want to get an approval as fast as possible, then you would want to be looking for a project that has an I-956F approval. Now, there's plenty of good projects that are on the market that don't have 956F approval and can still achieve your immigration goals. It's just that USCIS has not gotten to that petition in the queue yet. It can take around 10 to 12 months or so for USCIS to adjudicate an I-956F. Once that 956F has been approved, then USCIS is in a position to adjudicate I-526Es filed by EB-5 investors. And for some, in particular for rural projects where the Immigration and Nationality Act says that USCIS is to prioritize the processing of those petitions, we've seen adjudications in as quick as 3 to 4 months. For high unemployment area projects, we've seen adjudications in anywhere from like 6 to 10 months or so. So it's not nearly as long as it was a few years ago in EB-5. Sometimes I don't even believe the words that are coming out of my mouth, that these processing times are so quick compared to what I've been used to for the majority of my career. But that is what we're seeing on the ground. And it's incredibly beneficial because it really creates demand for the EB-5 program. One thing I wanted to make sure to mention is that just because an I-956F project application has been approved, that does not mean by itself that you are going to get your permanent green card. That 956F application shows that it complies with USCIS policies and that the forms were submitted correctly, but it doesn't really get to job creation. That is up to the actual expenditure of money for the project that you are investing in. And so there is a risk that if the money isn't spent and the construction doesn't happen, and the job creation doesn't occur, well, that can impact your immigration benefit. And so you want to find projects that are in a position to spend the money on the construction. Let me pause here and ask you a question, Marco, regarding this job creation. When you're looking at different types of projects, what types of, and they're in different phases of development. Is there a certain spot that you would like to see an EB-5 project be at before you would, give counsel or give thoughts to go with that type of project?
Right. Great question. Because we get investors looking for all the jobs having been created, projects where all the jobs are already created. And then, believe it or not, we also see people on the other end of this spectrum, and I'll tell you the reason. There is a competition between what I would say redeployment and job creation. So if a project comes comes already with the jobs created, meaning that it's in a very, very large last stages of its game, then it's very possible that if the PPM says 5 years plus 1 or plus 2 or plus even 3 in some cases extensions, then your money is probably going to get redeployed. So investors don't like that. So it is very possible that you're going to get green card certainty because of the job creation. Job creation basically means if your source of funds are good, if your source of funds are solid, and the jobs are created, you're getting a green card. But the capital, your capital, is going to be redeployed potentially in a project that you haven't seen, you haven't done the analysis. So therefore, you could see investors who trust the system that the jobs are going to be created. The regional center has a great track record, or they've checked the project, they really like the project, and they will take the other extreme where the project is in its early stages. So this way, they almost are ensured that there's not going to be redeployment. I don't want to talk about sustainment period now because I know we're going to speak about this later. But in the just one statement, in the new world where the sustainment period definition has changed, projects like this where no jobs have been created, the project is in its early stages, you've almost eliminated the redeployment risk. So if redeployment is a big concern to an investor, and we do see people who are concerned about that, then you would take that. I just want to make a comment, if I may, on the 956F, if you allow me.
Please, of course.
Yeah. So many people, even attorneys that I worked with, would say that I'm not going to touch a project that doesn't have a 956F approval. And you very nicely explained the benefits of 956F approval. But you also said that if the money is not spent, more like if the project is not built, if the building is not built, then that 956F does not mean much, right? So so you will see, I am sure you've seen projects with 956F approval that's been sitting, I'm not 56F, but the predecessor, the exemplar, we used to call them the exemplar. It's the same thing. So the exemplar approval is sitting in the marketplace for a year, 2 year, 3 year. So the reason is the project has some problems and the investors are seeing it. So therefore, just because the exemplar, the 956F is approved, it doesn't mean that this project is a solid project. On the other hand, there are plenty of projects in the marketplace, which I'm sure you know of. 956F is not approved, and by the time it's approved, it is sold out. Right, so many investors lose out if they insist on a 956F approved project, obviously there's a benefit to it, but at what expense? So if you see a project that is checking all the boxes, and again, as we said, we're going to go through, our boxes, at one point. So
Yep.
you see all those boxes and it's check, 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 check. And 956F is not approved yet. It's filed, as you said, it has to be filed, but it's not approved yet. That doesn't mean that this project is not a project that's worth investing in. So it's really an art. It's this thing is literally, there's a science to it. But at the end of the day, you have to take all of these into account to make a decision.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned jobs that were created before you invest, and the EB-5 program allows that in certain limited circumstances. When the project gets short-term bridge financing to start the project and to get the construction going off the ground during the time in which it's raising EB-5 capital, those jobs can still count towards job creation if the EB-5 capital that comes in later is used to replace that initial bridge financing. And so you want to look at those bridge financing documents if the I-956F has not yet been approved, because that's a critical part of counting the jobs. But for a lot of those, that's really good because you can start to move forward on the job creation, which is the key. I have written down here reserved visa categories. So the EB-5 law created 3 new visa categories. There's rural, high unemployment area, and infrastructure. For Chinese and Indian nationals, it makes no sense to do anything but those 3 because there are visa backlogs already in existence for the unreserved category. And for those outside of China and India, it also kind of makes sense to go with those reserved visa categories because you're getting the same immigration benefit for $250,000 less. If you're not in that reserved visa category, then the minimum investment is $1,050,000, and most of the regional center projects that are out there, if not a large majority of them, are at that $800K level. So just wanted to make sure about that. In terms of regional center due diligence, regional centers are merely an entity that has been designated by USCIS to connect immigrant investors with new commercial enterprises that are funding EB-5 projects. And so when regional centers are important and you want to do your due diligence on them, but in my mind, I think it's actually more important that you're looking at the project itself, because that project is the basis for the job creation. Now, a regional center that has decades of experience putting together projects and have repaid a lot of money back to investors, obviously that's great to see. And you want to make sure, obviously that's obviously a big benefit. But really what matters is what happens with this specific project that you are investing in. And so, regional center stuff is important, and I'm not trying to downplay it because when you think about regional centers, you want to talk about, their responsiveness. You want to talk about their duty of care. You want to see if there are conflicts of interest. Those are items that you need to evaluate when you are looking at the EB-5 project. But really what it comes down to is the job creation by the project and the financial ability of the project to repay the money back after you have completed that sustainment period. Okay, sustainment period. Great hedge into that. So the sustainment period, USCIS's new policy, which is still inconsistent with the regulations. Those regulations are a little bit inconsistent with the Immigration and Nationality Act, and so it's kind of a big mess. But right now, USCIS policy is that your money for new investors who file today, the money must be at risk for at least 2 years after the money has been transferred to the job creating entity and made available for job creation purposes. And so that is the minimum requirement for which you can still get your full immigration benefit, and then get the money back. When you actually get the money back depends on the project that you invest in and the contracts that you sign and the ability of the project to carry out its exit strategy. And so, Marco, if you don't mind, could you maybe touch on that point a bit? I know you were talking before about different loan terms. Are you seeing changes in the market to these EB-5 loan terms than you saw before this new sustainment policy came out? And I guess a follow-up would that be is, is it the best for investors and for the project to give the money back as quickly as possible? Or maybe it makes financial sense to keep the money in the project longer so you can get a better return. Can you touch on those items?
Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely, we're seeing a major change. There is almost no regional center who hasn't taken this into account and revised one way or the other their terms. So just to reiterate, the money needs to be lent out from NCE to the JCE. So the JCE has taken the money, and you have to show that the JCE has used the money for at least 2 years. And of course, the jobs also have to be created with the money. The two requirements: the jobs have to be created, and the money has to be used for at least 2 years. But to your point, any good project out there is not going to be able to, a substantial size, of course, good project out there, not going to be able to pay back the money in 2 years. And in reality, no PPM is saying that. PPM, the private placement around the terms of the trade of the transaction, is saying that. What we're seeing is, average 5-year maturities. They are coming in different flavors. There are people who put 3-year maturity on the PPM, and they say plus 1, plus 1 year, and then plus 1 year at the option of the NCE. There are others who will say 2 plus 3 ones, or So I think what this to answer, I think your other question, whether this is good or not, for the investor. I want to say it's good for the investor. I will say that it's good for the investor that the user of their money, user of their capital, should compete with each other and not have a free reign to have the money forever. Now, with this reserved categories that you mentioned, where at least for a while we don't have this retrogression issue. I don't know how long it's going to last, but for the time being, we're sort of free on this retrogression. It's looking pretty, possible that they are going to be able to get their money back sooner. There are just one more point, if I may. There are also projects out there that I would advise, for the lack of better term, that I would suggest that people don't touch. And the reason is because there's troubled projects, people who just want to grab the money, and the carrot that they will show is that I'll give your money back in 2 years. So it's good to give the money back in 2 years as long as you're going to be able to get the money back in 2 years. Putting the money, a capital in an EB-5 project with suspect future in job creation and or capital repayment, just because the project is promising 2 year back, is, for the lack of a better term, suicide. I wouldn't advise that at all. But a project that you have done the due diligence and you like the project, and I want to say, you asked me about market right now. In the marketplace, yes, there are quite a few projects that have shortened their payback period because of this announcement of USCIS.
Okay, so this leads me to two questions. One is, what types of exit strategies are generally used by projects to repay the EB-5 funds? And second, what happens if there is a loan agreement and they're supposed to repay it, but they don't? What are the consequences there? From a not necessarily from an immigration point of view, but from a financial point of view, and how these projects are marketed.
So the exit strategies are, as we know, most of the projects are either going to refinance the senior debt, and they're going to sell the project. And once that's a project, they are going to pay the senior debt, and then that's the time that EB-5 can be repaid. So it's either refinance or sale.
And let me pause there before you go to the next one. Let me pause there. So, in what circumstances would a project be better suited for a refinance than not? I'm just trying to help people understand the characteristics of projects when they're looking at repayment. I mean, if you're building an apartment building, right, and the occupancy rates are extremely low, then who's going to want to refinance that, right? Because the person who's doing the refinancing may be losing out on money. They would much rather prefer an apartment building that has high 90% occupancy rates, things like that. I'm trying to. Can you give any other examples of,
the interest rate environment? I mean, I think that's the most important thing, in my opinion, today. I mean, listen, I date back in Wall Street. So I've seen. I'm ashamed to admit that 21%. I was around here. Most of our listeners maybe were not born back then, but I was here. I was going to school. When the interest rates were 21% in this country. So I've seen high interest rate, but in the recent past, let's say in the last 10 years, interest rates have not been this high. So refinancing was a very normal thing. Right now, probably a senior debt that somebody took, a few percentage points less is not going to refinance. Why should he refinance? So he's going to look at other exit strategies, other potential ways to repay.
So there are macroeconomic considerations as well that impact the ability of EB-5 projects and really all investment projects to repay the funds back. Okay, good. I just wanted to touch on that. And sorry, I cut you off. And so the other question related to, well, what happens if the loan isn't repaid when it's supposed to be?
Depends on why it's not being repaid. If it's not being repaid because the project is in some, receivership or with some difficulty, and the JC has not given the money back to the NCE, then it really depends on what position the EB-5 is. And, you have EB-5 deals where once the senior loan is gone, they're essentially senior. So they can go and grab the collateral and they can really act like a bank. I mean, just like what a bank would do. There are others where the PPM allows the developer, the JC, whatever, the user of the money to be able to refinance. I don't like those deals. Those are bad, because what they do is they really dilute you more and more and more until you might end up with no collateral. So this is what I mean. You really have to look at these deals. You really look at the fine print and not say that every PPM is the same. They are not. They are very different, one from the other. They are very carefully written. Now, the other reason could be obviously fraud. I mean, you could say, and we've seen that. you could have a situation where NC does have the money, but it's been the agreement is such that they have the option to pay, but they won't pay. So those will be sued, of course. So I mean, there are many different possibilities.
Right. And I don't think fraud is very prevalent in EB-5. And I think there was that GAO report that said it was like under 5%, but it makes a lot of the headlines and the news, and it pushes people away and scares them from EB-5. But if you go
most projects, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
If you stay with household names, if you deal with immigration attorneys like yourself, and you're not going to let your investors go to those kind of projects. I know.
So before we get into more, I just have one last thing to say on the immigration consideration, is that the EB-5 law of 2022 required projects to either do fund administration or annual audits. This is extra paperwork that regional centers must comply with. It is part of the integrity measures in the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act. And the only thing I really want to say here is that fund administration is someone that is doing it's a third party that is overseeing transactions from the fund to the EB-5 project. That is more forward-facing, forward-looking. The other annual audits is looking at what happened in the past. It's more backwards-looking. And so if something funky were to have happened, well, you wouldn't catch that until the annual audit was done. And then they're supposed to give you a copy of that every year. And so, different regional centers, there's different costs associated with doing fund administration versus audits. It's just something that is, there's differences in the different projects that are out there. All right. So, Marco, I'm really glad you said it depends on where you are in the project. And that kind of gets to my thought of this capital stack. That is a term that I hear all the time in EB-5. Can you give us just a general, I don't want to say definition of capital stack, but sort of why that is so important when you're evaluating EB-5 projects?
Of course. So again, a capital stack, all it means is that, the money, the funds that are being used to, build a project. That's all it means. Typically, but not always, it will have three components. There will be a senior debt. There will be, let's say EB-5, but I'm going to open that up. And there is equity. So these are the three. And I will call an average deal and a typical deal, not a great deal from a capital stack standpoint, but definitely not a bad deal. 60% senior, 20% EB-5, 20% equity. That's what I would call a typical deal. More equity, better. If there's more equity, better. Less EB-5, better. And obviously less senior. That's where I hope we can have a little discussion. Whether less senior is better or not. But that's my very simple definition of capital stack. It's very important, and the ratios that we use in order to really dive and understand a project from a financial standpoint really focuses on this capital stack. Yeah.
And so when there is a senior loan involved, what then is the EB-5 capital considered in that capital stack?
So when there is a senior debt, typically you're going to have the EB-5 be subordinate to that. So in other words, all the collateral, all of it, is going to be pledged to the senior loan. And then once the senior loan is gone, when it's paid, then the EB-5 will have rights to that collateral. That's the way it's written. But as I mentioned a minute ago, it comes in different flavors, where the JCE could have I'm sorry, the JCE, I'm sorry, the project can have a possibility of being able to replace the senior debt. After, in other words, just put some more, or not. What I find is that, maybe we'll discuss this later, but just as a prelude, the difference between independent regional center to captive regional center models. In the independent regional center models, almost all the time, I see the PPM being quite strong, where they will not allow the developer, once the senior debt is gone, to be diluted. They become the senior. In the other cases, you could see in certain times when the regional center and the JC associate sister companies, you could see that there are exceptions to that.
Got it. So the way that I understand it, when you're looking at, the value of the collateral that is being used to secure the loan, ideally, you want the value of that collateral to be bigger than the value of the debt, right? That's going into the project. That's how you make sure that you are fully secured in the project. Because if you're not, and the project does not repay the money to the senior and to you, well, then the senior gets the first right to foreclose, sell the assets, get repaid, and then any leftover equity or money in the project would then be available to the EB-5 funds if they're in that second position. And if the collateral doesn't have a certain amount of value, then you might be able to lose out on some of that and not get the full $800K repaid. So that is something why I think it's so important when you're looking at these projects. I mean, I think investors have gotten very sophisticated about this, and rightfully so. I mean, they ask really good questions like, well, isn't there a benefit of having a senior lender in place as opposed to being in the senior position? Marco, what are your thoughts on that? I think there's pluses and minuses on both sides, but can you give us your general thoughts?
I can. I mean, this is one of my signature questions. And I think, when we were talking before, I told you I changed religion. So I'm still Jewish, but in terms of this particular aspect, I wouldn't touch a deal, really wouldn't touch a deal that didn't have a senior loan. And the reason is because I would say that if, just pick a number, 60% LTV is good enough for this major bank, 70%, 75%, is fine for me, for my investor. But if there's no bank, there's no EB-5 lender out there that is willing to lend money to this project, and you're putting the EB-5 on top of the capital stack, and you're telling me, you're 40%, less than even 60%. I don't like that. That was my stance. And now I am not saying that anymore. Now you're going to ask me why. The reason is because interest rates are now so high compared to when, we kind of were doing this a few years ago, that it really doesn't make economic sense for a developer to go and borrow money on a senior loan at a higher rate than they would be able to pay on the EB-5. It just doesn't make any sense. So now you can make this as a claim because it sounds nice, and then you can forget about the fact that we all wanted senior loans before. Or again, you look at the project. A claim is claim, but it has to be, you have to believe that that's the reason. In other words, if you believe, based on the facts of the project, after you analyze, if you understand, if the reason is because the senior loan rate was higher than the EB-5, so it doesn't really make any sense, and the project is solid as a rock, and people would have loved to be able to lend to this project, on the senior level, then of course we want to invest in that project. But if it's the other way around, and the only thing that the project has going for it is the fact that you're in the senior position, no, that's not valuable for us.
Right.
I don't know if I was able to.
No, I think, I mean, it's an important consideration on where you are, but it's not the be all end all. What's more potentially important is the ability of the developer to actually carry out and execute the business plan and be able to get a financial return. Because if you're in a senior position, but the developer has no ability to do it, then who cares, right? I mean, it's kind of like, you're putting the cart in front of the horse.
I mean, we have a situation, just if I can make one more statement. If we have a situation where the collateral, you mentioned the collateral is worth so much that without any construction, nothing, your EB-5 will be paid. So, let's say there's no senior loan, you're in the senior position, and the collateral is so valuable, like the equity is gonna pay for EB-5. That's nice from a capital return standpoint. Okay, I'm convinced that I'm not going to lose money, but at the same time, we talked about job creation here. We talked about the project being built, because what good is it that I'm secure to get my money back, but I don't have much confidence that this project is actually going to survive, create the jobs that I need to get my green card.
Right.
So therefore, we have to look at both.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of investors, when they do EB-5, and I think the reason why EB-5 exploded during that recession in 2008, 2009 is because interest rates were getting higher and developers were looking at how they can lower their cost of capital. And with EB-5, you don't have as high of interest rates as what's on the traditional financial markets, because what these EB-5 investors want, it's not necessarily return on investment. They want the green card, and they want to be able to have capital preservation and get that money back. And so the interest rates are a little bit lower, and they can lower their cost of capital by bringing EB-5 into the deal. All right, Marco, I know you wanted to share a spreadsheet that you do when you're looking at EB-5 projects. And I want to give you the opportunity to kind of really go through that, because I want you to explain what you're looking for when you are evaluating an EB-5 project. Like, what are the top characteristics or issues that you like to see, so that you feel comfortable, saying to an investor, hey, this is something that you want to be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, let me list them first before I go to the spreadsheet. Many of these things we have already discussed, so I'm just going to highlight them and move on. So, job creation. Obviously, we're looking for job creation certainty. How much of a buffer is there? How many have already been created? And we talked about all that already. The capital payback. So, you said, and rightly so, for some people, this is a very high percentage of their lifetime saving. So we want to make sure that they're going to get their money back. So we look at a few ratios for that. Maybe I just go down to those ratios now. So equity as a percentage of total project cost. So we want this number, obviously, as high as possible, right? Because the more the equity,
you want the developer to have skin in the game, is what you're trying to say.
Very, very good. Very good. Yes, exactly. Right. I want the developer to have a skin in the game. And then we have loans and EB-5 as a percentage of the forward appraisal. So, we don't really look at the capital stack here, because the capital stack can be X, but once the project is finished, if it's going to become 2X, So what do I care about capital stack? I want to know how much is this project going to become worth when the time comes for it to be for payment. And here, I'll tell you, Joey, we insist on seeing the appraisal report. Insist. So we don't just take a number. We want to see how reputable is this appraisal, how realistic is this appraisal, because we're using it to evaluate the project's viability.
When
So
you say forward appraisal, sorry, I just want to pause you for a moment. When you say forward appraisal, you mean once the construction has been completed and they are at a, I don't, at a point where they're making revenue, like what is the value at that time, right? That's what you're looking at.
I think the technical term is after stabilization.
After stabilization.
After stabilization, and there is a number. It's a single number, and all projects, good projects, will hire an expert to give them this report. Now, it's nice to read the report, but the report comes with a number, and that number goes into the spreadsheet here, right here. And loans and EB-5 as a percentage of forward appraisal. So obviously, we want this number as low as possible. We want the I don't know what we want to call it. I guess LT appraisal, whatever. I don't have a name for it. But this ratio has to be. We're looking at it to be as low as possible. And the last one, and I think you mentioned this one. I think you sort of pointed it. I believe you said, after the repayment of the senior loan, what's left? EB-5. So, okay, so how much is this EB-5 as the leftover? How much is it EB-5 as a percentage of the forward appraisal? We want this number also to be as low as possible. So, is it clear? Shall I see Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, so we want this number to be as low as possible. So, typically, I will get a number kind of like 33%. I will get a 30%. So people ask me, what does that mean? What does that mean? What that means is like this. If after the senior loan is repaid, and we have conviction that, if the lender is a very reputable lender, has done his work and, has great track record and all that. So it's like trustworthy. We believe that they will get paid. They will get paid. So now they're out. And they took some of the collateral with them, obviously, if they got paid, they got paid. So the collateral went down a little bit. So whatever collateral is left is what we're talking about now in the denominator. And in the numerator, the only thing that we will worry about is our EB-5. So, there's also equity, but that's below us. So we don't, that's not our concern right now. EB-5 is a percentage of the forward appraisal minus the senior loan. So that means that for every, let's say that the number is 33%, what that means is that for every 33 cents of EB-5 that I have with this developer, I have at that point $1 backing it. Right. $1 backing my 33 cents of EB-5. That's not bad. That's not bad. That's 3 times collateral, So we see deals that are even lower than that. Many deals that are lower than that we will see 20%, 25%, and we see higher than that. So it's not the most important criteria we look at, but it's pretty important. This now 34, row 34.
I just want to make sorry, Marco, I just want to make a point is that the EB-5 law and regulations don't have any requirements on what these percentages are. And so when EB-5 projects are structuring investment opportunities, it can be a wide range. And depending on what these percentages are, you have increased or decreased risks on getting your money back. And so that's why you would work with someone like Marco to help evaluate and understand these complex real estate finance type structures in order to put yourself in the best position to not only, get the green card, but also to get the money back at the end of the process. I think that's sort of the biggest point that I want to take here is that there is nothing in the EB-5 law or regulations that really govern that financial relationship between the EB-5 fund and the job creating entity, other than that the money must be sustained for a certain period amount of time. The type of financial relationship between the fund and the job creating entity is very important when you're thinking about repayment of capital. And that's just one of the considerations that an EB-5 investor is looking at when they're evaluating a project.
All right. So let me quickly go through this spreadsheet. So we look at the project location, who's the regional center, who's the developer. So sometimes they're sister companies, sometimes they're not. Now, when they're sister companies, it has benefits, Joey. It has benefits that there is accountability. So you go to one entity, and that one entity is responsible to get your money back. So I like to tell them that there are pros and cons of the two models, the sister company model as opposed to independent regional center model. Of course, you could find stronger covenants with when they're not related. But when they are related, you will find probably better accountability. So the developer, we look at some of our customers have developers have rating, believe it or not, from established rating agencies. Who's the third party fund administrator? To your point, you mentioned that they are the ones that at the top that are going to decide how the money is going to be spent. They're the ones who are, as you said, forward looking. They're the ones that going. We used to have escrow agent. Escrow agent was basically their job was finished. You will show them the building permit. You will show them whether the senior loan is committed or withdrawn or whatever. A few check box from the PPM, and then they would the NCE will be able to take the money out and give it to the JCE. But now we have a third-party administrator requirement that makes it, the transactions more secure. The senior lender, who is it? Is there one? Who is it? 956, is it filed? Is it approved? 526 rejection guarantee comes with many different flavors. There are 526 rejection guarantees that say if the project, if your denial is because of the project, then we'll give you the money back. If it's source of funds, we're not going to give you the money back. And sometimes, no fault of their own, some investors, could get a denial and because of the source of funds, and their money can be locked up for 5 years, 7 years, because they didn't read the language in the 526, which carved out all of those possibilities. The interest rate is becoming more important nowadays. In the past, you're right, it wasn't that the concern of the investors, but right now, with interest rates being so high, Treasury is paying 5% today. U.S. Treasury is paying 5% today. So this is becoming a more important thing. Building completion guarantee, who's giving it? Do they have deep pockets? Who's giving the building completion guarantee? Can I rely on it? Or is it just lip service? Now, this is something that's very rare, but it does exist. Corporate guarantee of the NCE loan to the JCE. Now, the common wisdom says the money has to be at risk, but that means that the investor's money to the NCE has to be at risk. So you cannot guarantee the investor. Certainly, the loan that the NCE gives to the JCE can be guaranteed. There's no law against the loan that is NCE that NCE is making to the JCE. That can be guaranteed, and most deals will have a guarantee, but the guarantee will come from the project. So that's there. There's not much worth there. You're looking for, if there is a guarantee, you're looking for a third party, a deep pocket third party guaranteeing that loan. in that case, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get your money back, because unless there's fraud, because if the JC cannot pay, the project failed, then that guarantee will kick in, and then the money will be in the NC's pocket. So that NC's raison d'etre is basically to distribute the money to you. You know, if they don't, that's essentially fraud. And then we look at these completion dates. We provide the project updates to our investors, you know, periodically, that we obtain, of course, from the projects. These are just you know, obviously we want it to be 800,000, as you mentioned. There's no point right now to go to an urban project and pay another $250,000, the admin fee. The long terms, you know, here also we have to be realistic. What I'm telling the investors is that you see a 3 + 1 + 1 + 1, add the numbers. You know, don't get tricked and say, it's a 3-year maturity. It's not. I mean, we're looking at here, you know, again, the spread between senior loan and EB-5 so high that nobody's paying your money back. Everybody's going to use those extensions. So just add the numbers up. That is your maturity. And then the investors are just, I mean, it's just a mathematical equation here. EB-5 divided by 800,000. So how many job creation you can expect? This is when the project is finished. So when we're evaluating the project, of course, we're also looking at how much is created, you know, already created now. It's not in the spreadsheet. Here, we're just very basic. When it is finished, how many will be created, so that we can calculate the buffer, the job creation buffer. And we're always looking for some buffer, you know, 30, 40% minimum buffer. And sometimes we're getting, Joey, you know, twice, 3 times the requirement in these deals. You know, we do see that. We do see that. And then the stack, the mentioned, the capital stack, the senior loan. Now, other loans could be money that came in from another EB-5 project that finished, and it just redeployed into this project, EB-5 portion. There are some government incentives that are actually great. It's like a CPACE that doesn't have to be paid for a very long time. They almost have like equity flavor. So we look at all of that, and then we calculate the ratios that I mentioned to you. Then we have some statistics that we look at, you know, the track record. When was the regional center established? When was the developer established? How many projects they have in the marketplace? And then, of course, the track record with the, you know, immigration, 526 file, the number of them approved, green cards, how many people have gotten money back, stuff like that. So it's pretty, you know, extensive, as you can see, our analysis. And other than that, I guess we would look at the speed of adjudication is something that, you know, we're really focusing on for the deals. We wanna make sure that people are investing in projects, you know, everything else constant, that will you know, get a result quickly. Now, there are some deals that you will have expedited processing. You know, they're great, but as long as it checks all these boxes. So as long as, you know, we went through all of this, and you see 2 projects, you know, everything's similar. One is expedited, the other is not. Obviously, you're going to be expedited, but you see that none of these you know, are checking. None is this checking, but it's expedited. The only thing going for it is that it's expedited. You know, we're not going for that project.
Right. Right. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and I agree with you. There are good rural projects. There's bad rural projects. There's good high unemployment. There's bad high unemployment. You know, there's, you know, there's no real rhyme or just because it's rural doesn't mean that it's going to be a certain way, or just because it's high unemployment area doesn't mean it's going to be a certain way. There are lots of considerations that I hope this webinar show that you have to consider when you're looking at EB-5. If you would like to schedule a time with Marco, here is his contact information. I'll leave it up here for another 10 seconds. And he is ready to help. Marco, do you have anything final you want to say before we go?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Joey. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to helping your clients.
Excellent. Well, we are very happy to help. If you guys have any questions, you can reach out to us all of these different ways. And here again is my contact information and Marco's contact information, and we look forward to assisting you in the future. So thank you so very much for joining, and we'll see you next time.